The spotlight was burning her eyes, but Maya Torres refused to look away from the 500 pharmaceutical executives staring back at her as she gripped the podium and delivered the most important pitch of her career. Antibiotic resistance will kill 10 million people annually by 2050 if we don't act now, Maya said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. My team at Biosynth Solutions has developed a compound that bypasses traditional resistance mechanisms entirely. We're not asking for your investment. We're offering you the chance to save lives while revolutionizing modern medicine. She clicked to the next slide, her research data filling the massive screen behind her. The conference hall at the San Francisco Marriott was silent except for the hum of the projector. This was her moment. 3 years of 18-hour days, maxed-out credit cards, and living in a studio apartment with 2 roommates had led to this presentation at the National Pharmaceutical Innovation Summit. As she scanned the audience, making eye contact to emphasize her points the way her public speaking coach had taught her, she noticed him. 3rd row, aisle seat. Dark hair, sharp jawline, an expensive navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But it wasn't his appearance that made her pause mid-sentence. It was the way he was looking at her, not at her slides, not at his phone like half the audience. At her. His gray eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her forget her next talking point. Maya blinked, found her place in her notes, and pushed forward. Traditional antibiotics target bacterial cell walls or protein synthesis. Our compound targets bacterial communication systems, preventing the formation of biofilms that... She glanced back at him. He was still staring, leaning forward slightly in his seat, completely absorbed. A small crease formed between his eyebrows as if he was memorizing every word she said. Heat crept up her neck. She was used to skeptical looks, bored expressions, people checking their watches. She was not used to being looked at like she was the only person in the room. Preventing the formation of biofilms that make infections difficult to treat, she continued, stumbling slightly over words she had practiced 100 times. Our preliminary trials show a 93% success rate in treating resistant Staphylococcus aureus infections with minimal side effects. The presentation lasted 20 minutes, though it felt like both an eternity and a split second. When she finished, the applause was polite but not enthusiastic. Industry veterans had seen countless pitches from hopeful scientists. Most failed to materialize into anything profitable. Maya knew she had maybe a week before the executives in this room forgot her name entirely. She gathered her notes with shaking hands and stepped off the small stage. Her business partner, Dr. James Chen, met her at the side of the room. "You crushed it," James said, though his optimistic tone couldn't quite hide the worry in his eyes. They both knew they needed funding within the next 2 months, or Biosynth Solutions would fold. At least 8 people want to schedule follow-up meetings. 8 out of 500 isn't exactly, Maya started, but James was already pulling her toward a small crowd of interested parties. The next hour was a blur of business cards, elevator pitches, and promises to send more detailed research documentation. Maya's feet ached in her heels, the only professional pair she owned, bought specifically for this conference. She was explaining their patent strategy to a woman from Merck when she felt it again. That awareness of being watched. She turned her head slightly and saw him standing near the refreshment table, a cup of coffee in his hand that he hadn't touched. He was still looking at her, though now he seemed almost embarrassed to have been caught. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. Instead, something surprising happened. He smiled. Not a polite networking smile, but something genuine and a little crooked that transformed his serious face into something warm. Maya quickly turned back to her conversation, her heart beating faster than it had during her presentation. What was wrong with her? She was here to save her company, not get distracted by some handsome stranger who probably stared at every woman like she was fascinating. But 20 minutes later, when she extricated herself from a particularly tedious conversation about FDA approval timelines, she found him standing directly in her path. "Dr. Torres," he said, and she was surprised he knew her name. His voice was deep, with a slight rasp to it. "That was an incredible presentation." "Thank you," Maya said, shifting her weight and wishing desperately that her feet didn't hurt so much. "Are you with one of the pharmaceutical companies?" "Not exactly," he said and held out his hand. "Ethan Reid, I own Reid Ventures." Maya's brain took a moment to process this. Reid Ventures, one of the largest private equity firms in the country, specializing in biotech and pharmaceutical investments. She had done her research on every major player who might attend this conference, and Ethan Reid was at the top of her fantasy list. He was 34 years old, a self-made millionaire who had turned a modest inheritance into a fortune by identifying promising medical technologies before anyone else saw their potential. He was also notoriously selective, funding only 2 or 3 projects per year. She shook his hand, aware that hers was probably clammy. "Mr. Reid, I'm familiar with your work. Call me Ethan, please." He still hadn't let go of her hand, and Maya became acutely aware of how warm his palm was against hers. "Your compound is fascinating. The mechanism of action is completely novel. You understood the biochemistry." Maya couldn't help the surprise in her voice. Most investors relied on consultants to translate the science. "I have a degree in molecular biology from Stanford," Ethan said, finally releasing her hand. "Made my first investment in a gene therapy company when I was 25. Lost everything because I understood the science but not the business. Had to learn both the hard way." There was something disarming about his honesty. Maya had expected someone slick and corporate, not this man who looked at her like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. "I'd love to discuss your research in more detail," Ethan continued. "Are you free for dinner tonight?" Maya's first instinct was to say yes, but James had made her promise not to take any meetings without him present. They were partners, equal owners of biosynth solutions, and she owed him that courtesy. "My business partner and I could meet with you tomorrow," Maya offered. "James Chen. He's a brilliant physician researcher. You should hear his perspective on the clinical applications." Something flickered across Ethan's face, disappointment maybe, before he nodded. "Of course. Professional consultation. Tomorrow works, though I was hoping." He paused, seeming to reconsider his words. "Never mind. Give me your contact information and my assistant will set something up." They exchanged business cards, Maya slightly bent from being in her pocket all day compared to his pristine cardstock. As she walked away to find James, she couldn't resist glancing back. Ethan was still standing where she'd left him, watching her go with that same intense expression that had distracted her during her speech. "Who was that?" James asked when she found him near the registration desk. "Ethan Reid." "From Reid Ventures." James's eyes widened. "The Ethan Reid. Maya, if we could get him interested. We have a meeting tomorrow," Maya said, trying to keep her voice level and professional. "Don't get too excited. He probably takes dozens of these meetings." But that night, lying in her uncomfortable hotel bed, Maya couldn't stop thinking about the way Ethan had looked at her. She'd dated sporadically over the years, but her research had always taken priority. The few relationships she'd attempted had fizzled out when boyfriends grew tired of playing second fiddle to her lab work. She'd convinced herself she was fine with that. Science was her passion, her purpose. Yet something about Ethan's attention had awakened something in her she'd forgotten existed. The feeling of being truly seen by someone, not just as a scientist or a business owner, but as a woman, as herself. She shook her head against the pillow. This was ridiculous. He was a potential investor. She needed to focus on saving her company, not fantasizing about some millionaire who probably looked at everyone with that same intensity. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. An email from an unknown address with the subject line, "Tomorrow's meeting." Maya opened it, expecting something from Ethan's assistant. Instead, the message was from Ethan himself. "Dr. Torres, I realize this is unprofessional, but I can't stop thinking about your presentation. Not just the science, though that's groundbreaking. The way you spoke about saving lives, the passion in your voice. I've been in this industry for 10 years, and I've never seen anyone care quite the way you do. I'm looking forward to our meeting tomorrow, though I'll admit I'm disappointed it's purely professional. If circumstances were different, I'd have asked you to dinner for entirely different reasons. Regardless, I think your work could change medicine, and I'd like to help make that happen. Ethan." Maya read the email 3 times, her heart pounding. This was definitely unprofessional. It was also the most honest thing an investor had ever said to her. Most of them hid behind corporate speak and vague promises. Ethan was laying his cards on the table, admitting both his business interest and his personal attraction. She should delete the email and pretend she'd never seen it. She should maintain strict professional boundaries. Instead, she found herself typing a response. "Mr. Reed, I appreciate your honesty, even if it's unconventional. I'll admit I noticed you in the audience during my presentation. You were the only person who looked like you actually cared about what I was saying. I'm focused on my research and my company right now, but I'm grateful for your interest in both the science and, well, everything else. Looking forward to tomorrow's meeting. Maya." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then immediately regretted it. What was she doing? This was the most important business opportunity of her career, and she was flirting with a potential investor via email at midnight. Her phone buzzed again almost instantly. "It's Ethan, not Mr. Reed. And I'll try to focus on the science tomorrow, though I make no promises if you wear that blue dress again. It matches your eyes." Maya laughed out loud in her empty hotel room, then clapped a hand over her mouth. This was insane. This was unprofessional. This was also the most exciting thing that had happened to her in years. She fell asleep smiling, her phone clutched in her hand. The next morning, Maya met James in the hotel lobby at 8. They had 3 meetings scheduled with different potential investors, including Reed Ventures at 2 in the afternoon. "You look happy," James observed as they grabbed coffee from the hotel restaurant. "Did something happen?" Maya thought about the emails sitting in her phone. "Just feeling good about yesterday's presentation." "Well, keep that energy. We need to close at least one of these deals, or we're going to have to shut down the lab." James's voice was matter-of-fact, but Maya could hear the stress underneath. He had a wife and a new baby at home. He needed this to work just as much as she did. The morning meetings were disappointing. The first investor spent 30 minutes explaining why their compound would never pass FDA trials. The second offered funding, but at such a low valuation that accepting would mean giving up majority control of their company. By lunch, Maya's optimism had faded. "Reed is our best shot," James said as they picked at salads in the hotel restaurant. "If he's interested, his reputation alone will attract other investors. We might actually have leverage." Maya nodded, her stomach in knots. She hadn't told James about the late-night email exchange with Ethan. She wasn't sure how to explain it without sounding like she was jeopardizing their business. At 1:45, they arrived at the suite Reed Ventures had rented for private meetings. A polished assistant greeted them and led them into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Ethan was standing at the window, talking on his phone. He was wearing a different suit today, charcoal gray with a crisp white shirt and no tie. When he turned and saw them, his face lit up in a way that made Maya's breath catch. "Dr. Torres, Dr. Chen, thank you for coming." He shook James's hand, then turned to Maya. When he took her hand, he held it just a fraction longer than necessary, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. "Please, sit." The meeting should have been straightforward. They discussed their research, their business model, their funding needs. James handled most of the conversation while Maya pulled up data on her laptop and answered technical questions. Ethan asked intelligent, probing questions that showed he really had read their research papers. He challenged their timeline for clinical trials, questioned their manufacturing costs, and pushed back on their patient projections. But through it all, Maya felt his attention on her. Not in an obvious way. He was looking at James when James spoke, nodding at appropriate times, taking notes. But every time Maya spoke, Ethan's focus sharpened. He leaned forward, maintained eye contact, and listened like her words were the most important things he'd ever heard. An hour into the meeting, James excused himself to take a phone call from his wife. The moment the door closed behind him, the energy in the room shifted. "Your research is solid," Ethan said, setting down his pen. "Better than solid. It's revolutionary." "Thank you," Maya said, suddenly very aware that they were alone. "I want to fund you," Ethan continued. "Full amount you're asking for at your proposed valuation. My lawyers can have contracts drawn up by end of week." Maya's heart leaped. This was everything they'd hoped for, delivered so casually it almost didn't seem real. That's incredible." "Ethan, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply. "Though I need to be honest with you about something." Maya braced herself. Here it came, the catch. There was always a catch. "I've been thinking about you since yesterday," Ethan said, his voice quieter now. "I know that's inappropriate given the business context. I know I should keep this professional. But I've never been good at pretending, and I don't want to start now. You're all I think about, Maya. From the moment I saw you on that stage, explaining your research like it was a calling rather than a career, I couldn't look away. I'm offering this funding because your science is brilliant and your company deserves to succeed. But I'm also hoping that once the business relationship is established, you might be willing to consider dinner with me, not as an investor and founder, just as two people who might enjoy each other's company." Maya stared at him, her mind racing. This was crazy. They'd known each other for less than 24 hours. He was offering her millions of dollars and asking her on a date in the same breath. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that mixing business and personal feelings could only end in disaster. But another part of her, the part that had responded to his late-night email and worn the blue dress again specifically because he'd complimented it, wanted to say yes. "I don't usually do this," Maya said carefully. "Mix work and personal life." "Neither do I," Ethan admitted. "I've made it a strict rule never to get involved with anyone connected to my investments. But then, I saw you yesterday, and every rule I'd made suddenly seemed less important than the chance to know you better." The door opened, and James walked back in, apologizing for the interruption. Meyer and Ethan smoothly pivoted back to business discussions, as if the previous conversation hadn't happened. But when the meeting ended and they all stood to shake hands, Ethan slipped a piece of paper into Maya's palm. In the elevator down to the lobby, Meyer unfolded it. A phone number and below it, When you're ready, no pressure, though I hope it's soon. He's going to fund us, James said, practically bouncing on his heels. Maya, do you know what this means? We can expand the lab, hire a full team, fast-track the clinical trials. We're actually going to make this happen. We don't have a signed contract yet, Maya cautioned, though she couldn't help smiling at James's enthusiasm. He's going to fund us, James repeated. I could tell, the way he was asking questions, pushing on our assumptions. He does that when he's already decided to invest. He's stress-testing to make sure we can handle the challenges ahead. We did it, Maya. We actually did it. That evening, after James left to catch his flight back to their lab in San Diego, Maya sat alone in her hotel room and stared at the piece of paper with Ethan's phone number. The smart thing would be to wait until after the contracts were signed and the business relationship was firmly established. The safe thing would be to keep appropriate professional distance. She picked up her phone and typed, "My flight home is tomorrow at noon. If you happen to be free for dinner tonight, I'd like to accept your offer. Just 2 people, no business talk." His response came within 30 seconds. "I'll pick you up at 7. Wear anything but the blue dress. I'd like to see you in something you chose without me in mind." Maya spent an embarrassing amount of time going through her limited wardrobe, finally settling on a simple black dress she'd packed in case of networking dinners. She kept her makeup natural, her hair down. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the nervous woman staring back at her. She was always confident in the lab, self-assured when discussing her research. But this was different. This was personal, vulnerable, terrifying. Ethan arrived at exactly 7, wearing dark jeans and a leather jacket that made him look less like a millionaire investor and more like someone who might ride motorcycles on weekends. He smiled when he saw her, that same genuine expression from yesterday. "You look beautiful," he said, and Maya believed him. He took her to a small Italian restaurant tucked away in North Beach, the kind of place that didn't take reservations but somehow always had a table for regulars. The owner greeted Ethan by name, kissed him on both cheeks, and led them to a quiet corner table lit by candlelight. "I went to college in the city," Ethan explained as they settled into their seats. "Used to come here when I was too homesick to study. Maria's pasta reminds me of my grandmother's cooking." "Where did you grow up?" Maya asked, grateful to start with easy questions. "Small town in Oregon. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a school teacher. They saved everything to send me to Stanford. My dad died my sophomore year, heart attack. He was only 53. Ethan's voice was steady, but Maya could hear the old pain underneath. "I remember standing at his funeral, thinking about all the medical advances that existed but never reached small towns like ours. When he started having chest pains, he didn't go to the hospital because he didn't have good insurance. By the time we convinced him to see a doctor, it was too late." "I'm sorry," Maya said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "That must have been devastating." "It's why I do what I do," Ethan said, turning his hand over to lace his fingers through hers. "I could invest in anything. Tech, real estate, whatever's trending. But medical innovations matter. They save lives. When I saw you yesterday talking about your antibiotic research, explaining how it could help people in underdeveloped countries who can't access advanced medical care, I saw someone who gets it. Someone who's not just chasing profits or prestige, but actually trying to make the world better." "That's a lot to project onto a stranger," Maya said gently. "You're right," Ethan acknowledged. "Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me about why you became a scientist." Maya took a sip of her wine, considering how much to share, but something about Ethan's openness invited honesty. "My younger sister died when I was 16, she said. "Bacterial meningitis. She was 12 years old, vibrant and healthy one day, gone 3 days later. The antibiotics they tried didn't work because she'd been exposed to a resistant strain. I watched her die, watched my parents fall apart, and I felt so helpless. So I decided to dedicate my life to making sure other families didn't have to go through what we did. Ethan squeezed her hand. That's why you were so passionate in your presentation. You're not talking about abstract concepts. You're talking about your sister. Her name was Sophia, Maya said, surprised to find tears in her eyes. She rarely talked about Sophia anymore, had learned to keep that pain locked away where it couldn't interfere with her work. She wanted to be a dancer. She was so talented, so full of life. Sometimes I think about all the things she never got to do, all the experiences she missed, and I get angry all over again. Angry at bacteria, at the limits of medicine, at a world where children die from treatable infections. Channel that anger into your research, Ethan said. Let it fuel you. I'll help however I can. They talked through dinner, conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Ethan told her about building his company from nothing, about the early failures and hard lessons. Maya shared stories from her lab, the frustrating setbacks and small victories. They debated the ethics of pharmaceutical pricing, discovered they both loved old movies and hiking, and argued good-naturedly about the best coffee in San Francisco. By the time dessert arrived, Maya had forgotten this was technically a first date with a potential business partner. It felt like catching up with someone she'd known for years, someone who understood her in a way few people did. I should warn you, Ethan said as they shared tiramisu, I'm not great at casual. When I care about something or someone, I tend to go all in. It's served me well in business but hasn't always worked out in my personal life. What happened in your last relationship? Maya asked. She wanted someone who would be home for dinner every night, someone who could separate work and life. I tried, but I'm not wired that way. When I'm passionate about something, it consumes me. He looked at her intently. I can already tell you're the same way. You understand what it means to be driven by something bigger than yourself. Are you saying we'd be compatible because we're both workaholics? Maya teased. I'm saying we'd understand each other, Ethan corrected. We'd respect each other's ambitions instead of resenting them. It was almost midnight when they left the restaurant. Ethan walked her back to her hotel, their hands linked, neither in a hurry despite the late hour. The San Francisco fog had rolled in, wrapping the city in a soft blanket of mist. I leave tomorrow, Maya said when they reached the hotel entrance. Back to reality, to the lab, to 80-hour work weeks trying to perfect our compound. I'll call you, Ethan promised. And I'll have my lawyers expedite the investment contracts. But Maya, the business stuff is separate from this, from us. Even if you decide you're not interested in pursuing anything personal, the funding stands. I need you to know that. I'm interested, Maya admitted. Terrified because this feels fast and intense and I don't usually do fast and intense. But interested. Ethan smiled and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Can I kiss you? Maya answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but quickly deepened into something that made her forget they were standing on a public street. Ethan kissed like he looked at her, with complete focus and intensity, like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I'm definitely going to be thinking about you constantly now. Maya laughed, feeling giddy and young and completely unlike her usual serious self. Good thing we'll have business calls to look forward to. I'm going to make those calls as professional as possible, Ethan said. Which will be torture, but I want to do this right. Business first, so there's no question about my motivations or conflicts of interest. Then, once everything's signed and settled, I'm taking you on proper dates until you're as crazy about me as I am about you." "Pretty confident," Meyer observed. "Optimistic," Ethan corrected. "There's a difference." They kissed once more before Maya forced herself to go inside. She looked back from the hotel lobby and saw Ethan still standing on the sidewalk, watching her with that same expression that had first caught her attention. She waved, and he waved back before turning to walk into the fog-shrouded night. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. True to his word, Ethan had investment contracts drawn up quickly. His lawyers negotiated with Maya and James's lawyer, but the terms were more than fair. Maya suspected Ethan had instructed his team to be generous, and she was grateful even as she insisted on maintaining appropriate business standards. They spoke on the phone almost daily, ostensibly about business matters, but always finding excuses to talk longer. Ethan called to discuss manufacturing timelines and ended up asking about her favorite books. Maya emailed about laboratory equipment needs and somehow found herself telling him about her childhood in Los Angeles, about her parents who still mourned Sophia, about the pressure she felt to succeed for everyone who believed in her. "You're allowed to do this for yourself too," Ethan said during one late-night phone call. "It doesn't always have to be about honoring Sophia's memory or saving the world. You're allowed to find personal satisfaction in your work." "That feels selfish," Meyer admitted. "It's not," Ethan insisted. "You can't pour from an empty cup. Taking care of yourself, pursuing your own happiness, that's not selfish. It's necessary." When the contracts were finally signed and the funding hit their business account, James literally cried. They could hire a full research team, expand their testing, move forward with FDA applications. Biosynth Solutions had gone from struggling startup to viable company almost overnight. "I know I'm supposed to play it cool," James said as they celebrated with cheap champagne in their tiny lab. "But Ethan Reed is basically a miracle worker. Whatever you did to impress him, thank you." Maya felt a twinge of guilt that she hadn't told James about the personal relationship developing between her and Ethan. But Ethan had been right to keep things separate until the business was settled. Now that it was, she could explore whatever this was between them without worrying about compromising her company. That evening, Ethan called. "The contracts are signed. You're officially funded, so I can officially ask you to come visit me this weekend without it being a conflict of interest." "Visit you where?" Meyer asked, even though her heart was already saying yes. "I have a house in Napa Valley. Nothing fancy, just a place I go to escape the city. I thought we could spend the weekend getting to know each other without business obligations or conference schedules getting in the way. I'll cook, we'll drink wine, talk, see where things go." "I've never left the lab for an entire weekend," Maya said. "Then it's definitely time you did," Ethan replied. "Say yes, Maya. Let yourself have something good." Maya thought about all the reasons she should say no. They barely knew each other. She had work to do. Getting seriously involved with an investor, even after contracts were signed, could complicate things down the road. But she also thought about the way Ethan looked at her, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he made her feel like she mattered beyond her research. She thought about the kiss outside her hotel and the late-night phone conversations that left her smiling at her bedroom ceiling. She thought about Sophia, who had died before experiencing love or adventure or any of the things that made life worth living. "Yes," Maya said. "I'll come." Friday afternoon, Maya left James in charge of the lab and drove north to Napa Valley. Ethan's directions led her up a winding road through vineyards to a house that was definitely fancier than he'd implied. It was a beautiful modern structure with huge windows overlooking rolling hills covered in grapevines. Ethan was waiting on the front porch, wearing jeans and a faded Stanford t-shirt that made him look younger and more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. When she got out of her car, he pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home. "You made it," he murmured into her hair. "You said nothing fancy," Maya accused, pulling back to gesture at the house. "This is fancy. This is comfortable," Ethan corrected. "Fancy is my place in the city, which I hate. This is where I actually live when I can." He carried her bag inside and gave her a tour. The house was open and airy, decorated simply but with obvious care. The kitchen was clearly well used, with copper pots hanging over a massive stove. The living room had comfortable furniture arranged around a fireplace, and the bedroom he showed her to had a balcony overlooking the vineyards. "I'm in the master's suite down the hall," Ethan said, setting her bag on the bed. "No pressure, no expectations. I just want to spend time with you." They cooked dinner together, Ethan teaching Maya how to make fresh pasta while they drank wine and talked. He was competent in the kitchen, moving with the easy confidence of someone who enjoyed cooking. Maya was less skilled but willing to learn, and Ethan was patient when she messed up the pasta dough twice. "My grandmother would be horrified," Ethan said, laughing as he helped Maya roll out the dough. "She spent 60 years perfecting her technique." "I'm a scientist, not a chef," Maya protested. "I can create novel antibiotic compounds, but apparently I can't make pasta." "You're doing great," Ethan assured her, his hands covering hers as he guided the rolling pin. "You just need practice." They ate on the back patio as the sun set over the vineyards, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The conversation flowed as easily as it had at the restaurant in San Francisco, ranging from serious discussions about their work to silly debates about movie preferences. "I still don't understand how you can hate romantic comedies," Maya said, shaking her head. "They're fun and sweet and make you feel good." "They're unrealistic," Ethan argued. "People don't fall in love in 2 hours with convenient misunderstandings that resolve themselves perfectly." "Says the man who told me I was all he thought about after knowing me for 1 day, Maya pointed out. Ethan grinned. "Okay, you have a point. Maybe I'm living in a romantic comedy and just didn't realize it." After dinner, they sat by the fire pit under the stars. Ethan wrapped a blanket around both of them and pulled Maya against his side. She fit there perfectly, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Can I ask you something serious?" Maya said. "Anything." "What do you want from this? From us?" "Because I need to know if this is just a fun distraction, or if you're looking for something real." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "I want something real. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent the last decade building my company and telling myself that was enough. But meeting you made me realize I want more. I want someone to come home to, someone who understands my work but is also building something of their own. I want partnership in every sense of the word." "That's a lot of pressure for a second date," Maya said, but she was smiling. "I told you I'm not good at casual," Ethan reminded her. "If that's too much too fast, tell me and I'll back off. But I'd rather be honest about what I'm hoping for." Maya turned to look at him, this man who had appeared in her life so unexpectedly and changed everything. "I want something real too. I'm scared because I've never made a relationship work before, because my research always took priority and I drove people away. But with you, it doesn't feel like I have to choose. You get it. You get me." Ethan kissed her then, slow and deep, the fire crackling beside them and the stars bright overhead. When they finally went inside hours later, Maya stopped at the door to the guest room. "I should probably sleep in here," she said reluctantly. "You probably should," Ethan agreed. But I really want you in my bed, Maya laughed. I'm not ready for that yet, but ask me again tomorrow. She did sleep in the guest room that night, though she lay awake for a long time thinking about Ethan just down the hall. This was crazy and fast and completely unlike anything she'd ever experienced. But it also felt right in a way she couldn't quite explain. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and followed it to the kitchen. Ethan was making breakfast, his hair messy and his feet bare. He looked up when she entered and smiled like seeing her was the best part of his morning. They spent the day exploring the area. Ethan took her to his favorite winery where they tasted wine and walked through the vineyards. He introduced her to the owner, an elderly Italian man who teased Ethan about finally bringing a woman to visit. "This one is special," the owner said to Maya in accented English. "Ethan, he comes here many times with many friends, but never with a woman. You must be important." In the afternoon, they hiked through the hills, Ethan pointing out local landmarks and sharing stories about the area. Maya found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. No lab equipment, no experiments running in the background of her mind, just the warmth of the sun and Ethan's hand in hers. That evening they cooked together again, this time more successfully. After dinner, they curled up on the couch and watched one of Maya's favorite romantic comedies. Ethan complained throughout, but Maya noticed he held her closer during the emotional scenes. "Admit it," she said during the credits. "You liked it." "It was tolerable," Ethan conceded. "Mostly because I spent the whole time thinking about how our story is better than anything Hollywood could write." "Our story is just beginning," Maya pointed out. "Exactly," Ethan said, "and I can't wait to see where it goes." This time, when they went to bed, Maya followed Ethan to the master suite. They made love slowly, taking time to explore and learn each other. Ethan was attentive and passionate, making Maya feel cherished in a way she'd never experienced. Afterward, she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I'm falling in love with you," Ethan said into the darkness. "I know it's too soon to say that, but I've never been good at hiding what I feel." Maya's heart raced. The logical part of her brain insisted this was too fast, too intense. But the rest of her, the part that had come alive since meeting Ethan, knew exactly how he felt. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted. "It's terrifying." "The best things usually are," Ethan said, kissing the top of her head. The next few months were a balancing act. Maya threw herself into expanding biosynth solutions, hiring new researchers and beginning the complex process of FDA trials. The work was demanding and all-consuming, but now she had Ethan to come home to on weekends. They split their time between San Diego and San Francisco, Maya driving north or Ethan driving south, whenever they could steal time together. He attended her lab presentations and asked intelligent questions. She joined him at industry conferences and helped him evaluate potential investments. They were partners in the truest sense, supporting each other's ambitions while building a relationship that grew stronger every day. James noticed the change in Maya almost immediately. "You're happy," he observed one day in the lab. "Like genuinely happy, not just satisfied with the research. It's weird to see." "I can be unhappy if you prefer," Maya joked. "No, it's good. You deserve this." James hesitated, then added, "It's Ethan, isn't it? You two are together." Maya nodded, relieved to finally confirm what James had probably suspected for months. "We've been seeing each other since the conference. I know it's complicated given the business relationship, but—" "But you're happy," James interrupted. "That's what matters. And honestly, having Ethan in our corner has been incredible. He's not just funding us, he's opening doors we never could have accessed on our own." It was true. With Ethan's support and connections, Biosynth Solutions was thriving. They'd secured partnerships with major research institutions, attracted top talent to their team, and were ahead of schedule on their FDA applications. Maya's compound was becoming recognized in the pharmaceutical community as a genuine breakthrough, but success brought its own challenges. Maya's schedule became even more demanding, with constant travel for presentations and consultations. Ethan was equally busy, managing his portfolio companies and scouting new investments. They went 2 weeks without seeing each other in person, communicating only through quick phone calls and text messages. "I miss you," Maya said during one late-night call. She was in a hotel in Boston after presenting at a medical conference. Ethan was in Los Angeles meeting with potential investors. "I miss you too," Ethan said. "This is the part of successful relationships no one talks about, the logistics. Maybe we need to figure out a better system," Maya suggested. "We can't keep going weeks without seeing each other." "Come live with me," Ethan said suddenly. "In San Francisco. I know your lab is in San Diego, but you could commute a few days a week, or we could open a second facility in the Bay Area. I just want to wake up next to you more than twice a month." Maya's first instinct was to list all the reasons that wouldn't work. Her lab was in San Diego. Her team was there. Uprooting everything would be complicated and expensive. But then she thought about how much she missed Ethan, how the best parts of her weeks were the moments they managed to steal together. "Let me think about it," she said. "It's a big change." "Take all the time you need," Ethan assured her. "I'm not going anywhere." But 2 weeks later, lying alone in her apartment in San Diego and aching for Ethan, Maya made her decision. She could expand biosynth solutions to include a Bay Area facility. She could hire an operations manager to oversee the San Diego lab on the days she wasn't there. She could make this work because she wanted to, because Ethan was worth rearranging her life for. She called him at midnight, not caring about the late hour. "I'll move in with you, but I have conditions." "Name them," Ethan said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I need my own office space in your house for when I'm working from home. I need you to understand that sometimes my research will take priority, and I'll be distracted or unavailable. And I need to know you're as committed to making this work as I am. Office space is easy, I'll convert the spare room. I already understand about your research because I'm the same way with my work. And Maya, I'm completely committed. I love you. I want to build a life with you." "I love you too," Maya said, feeling the truth of it settle in her chest. "When do you want me to move in?" "Tomorrow," Ethan said immediately. "But realistically, whenever you're ready." Maya moved in a month later after making arrangements for the lab and finding a qualified operations manager. Ethan had indeed converted the spare room into a home office for her, complete with a large desk, comfortable chair, and a whiteboard for brainstorming. He'd also cleared half his closet and bathroom for her things, making space for her in his life in practical, tangible ways. Living together was an adjustment. They were both used to living alone, to having complete control over their space and schedule, but they learned to compromise. Ethan discovered that Maya needed absolute quiet when she was working through complex problems. Maya learned that Ethan liked to go for runs early in the morning and came back energized and ready to talk. They established routines, little rituals that made the house feel like theirs instead of his. Maya's favorite part was the mornings. Waking up next to Ethan, drinking coffee together before they both dove into work, stealing kisses in the kitchen. These small domestic moments felt more precious than any professional success. 6 months after moving in, Maya was working late in her home office when Ethan knocked softly on the door. "Can I interrupt?" he asked. Maya looked up from the research paper she was reviewing. "Always." "What's up?" Ethan came in and sat on the edge of her desk. "I've been thinking about the future, about our future." "Okay," Maya said slowly, her heart starting to beat faster. "I love you, Maya. I love the life we're building together. I love that you understand my work and I understand yours. I love waking up next to you and falling asleep with you in my arms. I love that you challenge me and support me and make me want to be better." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple diamond ring. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Maya stared at the ring, tears springing to her eyes. They'd been together less than a year, which seemed impossibly fast, but it also felt exactly right, like everything in her life had been leading to this moment. "Yes," she said, launching herself at him. "Yes, of course, yes." Ethan caught her, laughing and spinning her around. They kissed, the ring momentarily forgotten as they held each other tight. When they finally broke apart, Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, just like everything else between them. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony in Napa Valley, surrounded by close friends and family. Maya's parents cried, telling her that Sophia would have loved Ethan. James was Ethan's best man, joking in his toast about how he'd known from the first meeting that something was developing between them. Ethan's mother gave Maya the family recipe for the pasta his grandmother used to make, welcoming her officially into the family. During their first dance, Ethan pulled Maya close and whispered, "Remember when you caught me staring during your speech?" "How could I forget?" Maya said. "You looked at me like I was the only person in the world." "Because you were," Ethan said. "You still are. You're all I think about, Maya. You always will be." Maya rested her head on his shoulder, swaying to the music and thinking about how much her life had changed in such a short time. A year ago, she'd been struggling to save her company, pouring everything into her research with no room for anything else. Now she had success, love, partnership, everything she'd never let herself dream about because it seemed impossible. "I love you," she said. "Thank you for seeing me that day. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me how you felt. Thank you for being brilliant and passionate and brave enough to say yes," Ethan replied. The next year brought more changes. Biosynth Solutions' antibiotic compound passed Phase 2 clinical trials with flying colors. Maya's research was featured in major medical journals. She was invited to speak at conferences around the world, her work finally receiving the recognition it deserved. Through it all, Ethan was her constant support. He celebrated her victories and comforted her through setbacks. He understood when she had to travel for weeks at a time, and made sure to surprise her with flowers and encouraging texts. He never made her feel guilty for prioritizing her research, because he understood what it meant to be driven by purpose. Maya did the same for him. She attended his business dinners and helped him evaluate potential investments. She reminded him to take breaks and eat properly when he got too absorbed in work. She understood his drive to succeed because she felt it too. 2 years after their wedding, Maya got news that changed everything. Her antibiotic compound had passed Phase 3 trials. It was effective, safe, and ready for FDA approval. Years of work, of sacrifice and long nights and unwavering determination had paid off. Her research would save lives, just like she'd always dreamed. She called Ethan immediately, crying so hard she could barely speak. He left a meeting without explanation and drove home to find her sobbing on the couch, clutching the email from the FDA. "We did it," Maya said when she could finally speak. "Ethan, we actually did it. This drug is going to save people. It's going to help families like mine, keep them from losing someone they love." Ethan held her, crying too. "You did this, Maya. You and your brilliant mind and your refusal to give up. I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you," Maya insisted. Your funding, your support, your belief in me when no one else did. We did this together. That night, they celebrated quietly at home. No big party, no media announcement yet. Just the two of them, drinking champagne and talking about what this meant for the future. We should have a baby, Maya said suddenly, the champagne making her brave enough to voice the thought that had been growing in her mind for months. Ethan looked at her in surprise. A baby? I know we're both busy and it won't be easy, but I want to build a family with you. I want to create something beyond our work, something that's just ours. She paused, then added softly, I think Sophia would have wanted me to live fully, to experience everything. Not just success, but love and family and all the messy, wonderful parts of being human. Ethan pulled her into his lap, cradling her face in his hands. I would love to have a baby with you. You're going to be an amazing mother. You'll be an amazing father, Maya said. Patient and kind and passionate about making the world better, just like you are with everything else. They started trying that night, and 3 months later, Maya took a pregnancy test that came back positive. She told Ethan by leaving the test on his desk with a note. New project. Due in 9 months. Co-parent wanted. Inquire within. Ethan found her in the kitchen and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed. We're having a baby, he kept saying, like he couldn't quite believe it. We're actually having a baby. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Maya hated having to cut back on her lab hours. She worked from home more, writing papers and consulting remotely while her body grew and changed. Ethan was attentive and excited, reading parenting books and setting up the nursery with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. Their daughter was born on a sunny morning in May. They named her Sophia Rose, honoring the sister Maya had lost while celebrating the new life they'd created. The moment the nurse placed Sophia in Maya's arms, she felt something shift in her chest. This tiny person, with Ethan's gray eyes and a surprising amount of dark hair, was theirs. They had made her, and they would protect her and love her and give her all the opportunities the first Sophia never got. She's perfect, Ethan whispered, his arm around Maya's shoulders as they both stared at their daughter in wonder. She really is, Maya agreed. The first few months were exhausting and overwhelming. Maya had always thought running a biotech company while conducting groundbreaking research was hard, but that was nothing compared to caring for an infant who needed attention every few hours. She and Ethan took turns with nighttime feedings, both stumbling through their days on minimal sleep, but there were also moments of pure joy. Sophia's first smile, directed at Ethan while he sang her an off-key lullaby. Her laugh when Maya made silly faces. The way she grabbed their fingers with her tiny hands and held on tight. These moments made everything worth it. Maya cut back her hours at the lab even more, hiring additional staff to handle the day-to-day operations. She'd achieved her primary goal with the antibiotic research. Now it was time to let others help carry it forward while she focused on her family. It was a difficult adjustment, learning to delegate and trust her team. But it was also freeing in a way she hadn't expected. I spent so many years thinking my work was the only thing that mattered, Maya told Ethan one evening as they watched Sophia sleep in her crib. But this matters just as much, maybe more. Creating a life with you, raising our daughter, building a family, it's a different kind of legacy. You can have both, Ethan said. You don't have to choose between being a brilliant scientist and a devoted mother. You're already proving you can do both beautifully. When Sophia was 6 months old, Biosynth Solutions received official FDA approval for their antibiotic compound. The announcement made national news. Maya did interviews from her home office, Sophia often visible in the background, and she talked honestly about balancing motherhood and career. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of mothers in STEM reached out to thank her for showing that it was possible to have both professional success and a family. The antibiotic went into production, initially distributed to hospitals treating drug-resistant infections. The results were exactly what Maya had hoped for. Success rates skyrocketed. Patients who would have died from resistant infections survived and went home to their families. Maya received letters from grateful parents, from survivors, from doctors who finally had an effective tool to fight superbugs. One letter in particular made her cry. It was from a mother whose 12-year-old daughter had contracted bacterial meningitis, just like Sophia had. But unlike Sophia, this girl had survived thanks to Maya's compound. "You saved my daughter's life," the mother wrote. "I will never be able to thank you enough. Because of your research, my girl is still here, still laughing, still dancing. You gave us a miracle." Maya kept the letter in her office, reading it whenever she felt discouraged or overwhelmed. This was why she dedicated her life to this work. This was Sophia's legacy, continuing through every life saved. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Maya with a trip back to San Francisco, the city where they'd met. He took her to the same hotel where she'd presented at the pharmaceutical conference. "5 years ago, I walked into a conference hall and saw the woman who would change my life," Ethan said as they stood in the now-empty room where Maya had given her presentation. "I couldn't stop staring at you. You were so passionate, so brilliant, so completely yourself. I fell in love with you before we even spoke." "I noticed you too," Maya admitted. "You looked at me like I mattered, like what I was saying was important. I'd never felt so seen by anyone." "You're all I think about," Ethan said, echoing the words he'd said that first day. "Still, always. You and Sophia, our family, the life we've built. I wouldn't change a single moment. Not even the sleepless nights and the times I was impossible to live with because of work stress," Maya teased. "Especially those moments," Ethan insisted, "because they're real. They're us, figuring out how to build a life together. I love the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of being married to you." They renewed their vows that evening in a private ceremony, just the two of them and an officiant. It felt right to recommit to each other in the place where their story had begun, to acknowledge how much they'd grown and changed while their love had only deepened. 2 years later, they had a second child, a son they named Daniel after Ethan's father. Biosynth Solutions expanded internationally, making Maya's antibiotic compound available in developing countries at subsidized costs. Ethan's venture capital firm continued to fund groundbreaking medical research, with Maya consulting on potential investments. They bought a bigger house in Napa Valley, one with room for the kids to run and play. Maya set up a home lab where she worked on new research projects, always chasing the next breakthrough. Ethan continued to manage his firm but made a point of being home for dinner every night, of coaching Daniel's little league team and attending Sophia's dance recitals. On Sophia's 8th birthday, Maya brought her daughter to visit the lab. Sophia was fascinated by the microscopes and Petri dishes, asking endless questions about bacteria and medicine and how things worked. "You think you might want to be a scientist someday?" Maya asked as they looked at bacterial cultures under the microscope. "Maybe," Sophia said thoughtfully. "Or maybe a dancer. Or maybe both." "Can you be both?" "You can be anything you want," Maya told her daughter. "You can be multiple things, change your mind, follow your passion wherever it leads. The important thing is to do work that matters to you, that makes you excited to get up in the morning." "Like you and Daddy," Sophia observed. "You both love your work." "We do," Maya agreed. "But we love our family more. Work is important, but the people you love, the relationships you build, those are what make life meaningful." That evening, after the kids were asleep, Maya and Ethan sat on their back patio watching the sunset over the vineyards. "You ever think about that first day?" Maya asked. "At the conference when you couldn't stop staring." "All the time," Ethan admitted. "I remember thinking you were going to change my life, even though I didn't know how yet. Turns out I was right." "You changed my life too," Maya said, lacing her fingers through his. "Before you, I thought I had to choose between my work and having a personal life. You showed me I could have both, that they could complement each other instead of competing." "We showed each other," Ethan corrected. "That's what partnership is, helping each other become the best versions of ourselves." Maya leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly content. Her antibiotic research had saved countless lives and would continue to do so for years to come. She had a thriving company, a loving family, and a partner who understood and supported every part of her. Sophia would be proud of the life she'd built, the way she'd turned tragedy into purpose and grief into something beautiful and meaningful. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "How happy I am," Maya said simply. "How grateful. You told me once that you were all I thought about, but it goes both ways. You're my first thought in the morning and my last thought at night. You're the person I want to tell everything to, good and bad. You're my home." "You're my home too," Ethan said. "My love, my partner, my everything." They sat together as the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Somewhere inside, their children slept peacefully. The work they'd both dedicated their lives to continued, saving lives and making the world better. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered as much as the simple fact that they had each other. Maya thought about the younger version of herself, standing at that podium 5 years ago, terrified and determined and completely unaware that her life was about to change. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything would work out better than she could imagine. That the man staring at her from the third row would become her husband, her partner, the father of her children. That love and success weren't mutually exclusive, that she could have both if she was brave enough to reach for them. But maybe she didn't need to go back and tell her younger self anything. Maybe everything had unfolded exactly as it needed to, leading her to this perfect moment of contentment and love. "I love you," Maya said, not for the first time and definitely not for the last. "I love you too," Ethan replied, his arms tightening around her. "Always." And that was the truth of it, the simple, profound truth that had started with a shared glance in a crowded conference room and had grown into a lifetime of partnership and love. They had built something beautiful together, something lasting and real and true. Years later, when Sophia started college with plans to study both biochemistry and dance, Maya thought about how life had a way of coming full circle. Her daughter, named after the sister she'd lost, was living the life the first Sophia never got to have. She was pursuing her passions, taking risks, refusing to be limited by other people's expectations. And Maya, who had once believed she had to sacrifice personal happiness for professional success, had discovered that the greatest achievement of her life wasn't her groundbreaking research or her successful company. It was the family she'd built with Ethan, the love they'd nurtured and grown, the life they'd created together. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Ethan took Maya back to San Francisco one more time. They walked through the conference center where they'd first met, both laughing at how much had changed. "Should we go find the room where you gave your presentation?" Ethan suggested. "Actually, I have a better idea," Maya said, pulling him toward a different wing of the building. She led him to a large auditorium where a medical conference was taking place. They slipped into the back row and watched as a young woman researcher presented her work on cancer immunotherapy. The woman was nervous but passionate, speaking with conviction about saving lives and revolutionizing treatment. And in the third row, a young man sat forward in his seat, watching the presenter with complete focus and fascination, unable to look away. Maya squeezed Ethan's hand. "Look familiar." Ethan smiled, pulling her close. "That's exactly how I looked at you." "Maybe we're watching the beginning of another love story," Maya whispered. "Maybe," Ethan agreed, "but ours is still my favorite." They left the conference hand in hand, walking out into the San Francisco sunshine, ready for whatever came next. Because that was the thing about love, real love. It wasn't just one moment of connection or one dramatic confession. It was choosing each other every single day, building a life together piece by piece, supporting each other's dreams while creating shared ones. It was Ethan staring at Maya during her speech, unable to look away. It was Maya catching him and feeling seen for the first time. It was him confessing that she was all he thought about, being brave enough to be vulnerable. It was her saying yes again and again to love and partnership and building a life together. Their story had started in that conference room 15 years ago, but it hadn't ended. It continued every morning when they woke up together, every evening when they came home to their family, every moment they chose each other. It would continue for the rest of their lives, a love story without an ending because true love doesn't end. It just keeps growing, keeps deepening, keeps becoming more beautiful with every passing year. And Maya and Ethan, who had found each other against all odds, who had built something extraordinary from a single shared glance, would keep choosing each other for all the years to come. That was their happily ever after. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better. A real, messy, beautiful, complicated, absolutely perfect life built on love, partnership, and the unwavering commitment to never stop seeing each other the way they had that very first day.